Welcome, the anointed ones. Every lie has an expiration date, and yours just hit the shelf at the exact moment their mouth ran dry. That's the energy surrounding this moment, chosen one. A moment where the entire city, community, and even the silent watchers in the back row suddenly snapped out of whatever spell your enemies tried to cast, and finally saw you for who you truly are. It's that rare shift where truth doesn't walk in politely, it barges through the door like, "Move, I'm late, but I'm here now." For months, sometimes years, people formed opinions about you based on recycled gossip, jealousy-driven storytelling, and the dramatic monologues of people who couldn't stand your potential. But here's the hilarious twist. Psychology shows that humans naturally side with whoever seems the calmest, the most consistent, and the least performative. Which means while they were over there hosting a whole Broadway production, you were simply living your life and winning simply by existing. And now? Now the entire city is eating it up. It's like everyone realized at the same time, wait, hold on. You were the problem? Or was it the one who's been screaming in 4K HD for months? Even the people who pretended not to care suddenly care a lot. The ones who watched from the sidelines are now tripping over themselves trying to switch teams, like fans who realize they backed the losing side, and they're doing it fast before someone records them. This isn't karma, it's clarity, pure, undeniable clarity. The whispers have reversed, the energy has flipped, and the same mouths that once confidently spoke against you are now chewing on their own words like dry biscuits with no water. They're embarrassed, they're exposed, and they're shocked that the truth didn't just come out. It marched out with receipts, a spotlight, and a microphone. And the best part, you didn't even have to argue. You didn't campaign, beg, explain, or defend. You lived, you endured, you elevated, and the city paid attention. Because here's a fact that never fails. When a person lies, the story changes. When a person tells the truth, the pattern repeats. And your pattern, your character, your consistency, your resilience, became undeniable. So now the entire city is siding with you, not because you yelled the loudest, but because they finally saw the difference between someone building a life and someone building drama. Your enemies didn't just lose the narrative, they lost credibility. And depending on how loud they were, they might have even lost friends, fans, and followers too. But don't worry, they'll survive. Eventually. Probably. For now, grab your seat. Because what happens next will make their regrets echo louder than anything they ever tried to say about you. Number one, they weren't just wrong about you. They were loudly wrong in public. And now their own echo is choking them. When people decide to underestimate you, it's one thing. When they decide to do it loudly in front of everyone, it's a different level of entertainment and humiliation. They built their confidence on the assumption that no one would ever see the truth behind their words. They spoke as if your life was a story they were allowed to narrate, assigning you roles that didn't belong to you, predicting failures that never happened, and creating drama around things they didn't understand. They expected applause for their boldness, assuming that the more noise they made, the more people would believe them. The problem is, life has a way of turning loud mouths into their own worst enemies. Every boast, every insult, every public prediction of your failure became a seed that would sprout in the form of proof. The more they shouted, the more the world noticed the contrast between what they claimed and what actually existed. People started paying attention, not to their words, but to your actions. Slowly, quietly, those actions began speaking louder than any of their declarations ever could. And now the echo of their lies is all that's left, bouncing back at them with a weight they didn't anticipate. What's extraordinary is how public their error became. Everyone who watched, even casually, noticed the discrepancy. It's one thing to be wrong in a private conversation. It's another to be wrong in front of an audience, especially when that audience eventually takes your side. The city, the community, even the casual onlooker, all started noticing that they were not just misjudging you, they were dramatically misrepresenting you, and the louder they had been, the harder it hit them when the truth became visible. Now they're trapped in a feedback loop of their own making. Every word they spoke against you, every confident prediction of your failure, is returning to them in the form of embarrassment. People laugh, people shake their heads, people quietly switch their loyalty to someone who proved without trying that their assumptions were dead wrong. What they didn't realize is that by being loud, they ensured that their mistake would be just as public, just as undeniable, and just as humiliating as they ever dreamed of your downfall being. They underestimated the power of your consistency and presence. Now they are forced to watch as the city sides with you, proving that their arrogance was their downfall, and that truth once revealed is louder than any shout. Number 2, the same people who doubted you are now quoting you, copying you, and studying you like you're a blueprint. There's a strange kind of irony in watching the people who once doubted you suddenly become students of your life. The same voices that laughed at your ideas, mocked your confidence, and dismissed your ambitions are now the ones paying close attention to every move you make. They thought they understood your limits, and they assumed that your success was a fluke, a lucky break, or something temporary. What they didn't realize is that what they were seeing all along was the foundation of something far bigger than themselves, and now they're scrambling to catch up. They watch the way you handle situations, the decisions you make, the energy you carry, and the results you produce, and they take notes, literally and mentally. They're trying to reverse engineer a life they once claimed would never happen for you. Every habit they ignored when you were struggling suddenly seems like a genius strategy. Every word they laughed at suddenly feels like a lesson. They are studying you as if you're a manual on how to succeed. But here's the reality. They are behind, and no amount of observation can give them the years of discipline, resilience, and instinct that got you to this point. What's even more humiliating for them is that their own attempts to replicate your moves rarely work. They forget the subtlety, the patience, and the timing that you mastered while they were busy underestimating you. They try to quote you, mimic your style, and perform your confidence, but the city sees through it instantly. People can tell when someone is imitating versus when someone is authentic, and authenticity always wins. Meanwhile, your progress continues unaffected, like a river flowing past anyone trying to dam it. Their attention, once dismissive, has turned into obsession. The very energy they used to throw at bringing you down is now being used to watch, learn, and copy. And every glance they cast your way is a silent acknowledgement that they misjudged you, underestimated you, and failed to see your potential from the very beginning. In the end, their study doesn't level the playing field. It just proves who was really ahead all along. They are forced to follow your lead, to take notes on your blueprint, and to accept that while they were busy doubting you, you were busy creating a reality they can only try to understand, not replicate. Number 3, their biggest miscalculation was believing the city wanted entertainment, but the city wanted truth, and you delivered it. They spent so much time crafting drama, amplifying conflict, and putting on performances, assuming the public would be entertained enough to take their side. They treated your life like a show, thinking if they could hype the chaos, exaggerate every slip, and twist every action, the city would applaud their version of events. They believed spectacle could replace substance, gossip could replace evidence, and noise could drown out reality. That was their first and biggest mistake. The truth is, people don't stay loyal to the loudest voice or the most dramatic story. They gravitate toward reality. They notice consistency, authenticity, and results. While your detractors were busy performing for an imaginary audience, you were quietly building, executing, and living your truth. You weren't trying to be loud or flashy. You weren't trying to prove anyone wrong with theatrics or confrontation. You simply stayed consistent, stayed true, and stayed productive. That contrast alone made the city notice the difference between someone performing a role and someone living a life. Their arrogance came from underestimating the city's ability to see through pretenses. They assumed people would be distracted by drama, but the truth has a way of piercing through noise. People started comparing what they were witnessing with what was actually happening. They realized your actions aligned with your words, your results reflected your claims, and your presence carried an authenticity they couldn't fake. The audience switched without announcing it, quietly moving their support toward someone who actually delivered. Every lie, exaggeration, and performance from your enemies only highlighted your integrity. The more they tried to entertain, the more the public craved reality, and you had it in spades. Their miscalculation wasn't just underestimating you, it was underestimating the crowd's intelligence and their natural instinct to recognize truth when it's staring them in the face. Now, the city isn't just observing you, they're following you. They're siding with someone who consistently delivers reality over spectacle, truth over theatrics, and substance over noise. And while your enemies are still performing, the people who matter have already decided where their loyalty belongs. Their attempt at entertainment became their downfall, and your quiet truth became the victory everyone is witnessing. Number 4. Their story collapsed. Because it required you to fail, and you refused to play that role. Their entire narrative was built on the hope that you would fall apart. They crafted stories, exaggerated flaws, and spread assumptions with the confidence that sooner or later you would break in a way that made their version look believable. They weren't just predicting your downfall, they were depending on it. Their ego needed you to fail so they could justify their envy, their insecurity, and their petty behavior. Without your collapse, their story had no foundation, no weight, and no credibility. But the problem for them was simple. You didn't fall. You didn't crumble, panic, or spiral the way they expected. Instead, you kept moving, kept growing, and kept proving them wrong just by living your life with focus and resilience. Every day you stayed grounded was another crack in the fantasy they had created. Every achievement you secured, no matter how small, was another piece falling off their shaky storyline. Your strength didn't just protect you, it exposed them. People began noticing the disconnect. They saw that your life didn't match the chaos others described. They saw that your character didn't reflect the negativity being thrown around. The city realized that the only person pushing the narrative was the one who stood to benefit from your failure. And that's when everything shifted. The crowd wasn't blind. They were just waiting to see the truth unfold. And once it did, the entire script flipped. Suddenly, the person who tried to paint you as unstable looked unstable themselves. The one who tried to make you seem weak looked weak for needing your downfall to feel important. Their bitterness became obvious, their desperation became visible, and their intentions became embarrassing. Your refusal to collapse destroyed the only story they had. You didn't fight them, you simply didn't give them the performance they rehearsed for. You lived, you grew, and you rose above the nonsense, leaving them standing in the ruins of a narrative that couldn't survive without your destruction. In the end, the city didn't side with you because you shouted louder or fought harder. They sided with you because the truth became undeniable. Anyone who needs someone else to fail just to feel powerful is the real villain, and they exposed themselves without you lifting a finger. Number 5. Your evolution exposed. Their stagnation. You didn't outshine them, you outgrew the version of you they wanted you stuck in. Your growth wasn't loud or performative, but it was relentless, and that's what made it impossible to ignore. They had an image of you, small, limited, predictable, and they expected you to stay there, trapped in a version of yourself that made them feel comfortable and superior. Every step forward you took shattered that illusion. You didn't just become better, you became a version of yourself they had never anticipated, a version they had no control over, and a version they could no longer contain in their narrow perception. What they hated wasn't your success itself, it was the mirror it held up to them. Watching you evolve forced them to confront their own stagnation, their own excuses, and the ways they had settled for less than they were capable of. Your progress wasn't an attack on them, it was a revelation. It revealed their fear of growth, their resistance to change, and the habits that kept them stuck while you moved forward with focus and vision. Every achievement you secured, every milestone you crossed, became a silent spotlight exposing the contrast between your evolution and their inertia. And that's why they look foolish. They aren't merely losing a race, they're struggling to comprehend that the person they underestimated has moved far beyond the constraints they once imagined for you. Their attempts to downplay your growth, to minimize your wins, or to criticize your progress only highlight how far ahead you've gotten. You didn't need to compete with them. You didn't need to prove anything. Your growth was its own statement, its own evidence, and its own form of victory. They believed they could define you, limit you, or predict you. But evolution doesn't wait for permission. It doesn't ask for approval. You simply outgrew the expectations they tried to set, the boxes they tried to lock you into, and the narrative they tried to control. And now, all anyone sees is the stark contrast. The person who refused to remain small, and the people who desperately wished they had done the same. Their fear and frustration make them look ridiculous, and the city, the witnesses, and even casual observers can't help but notice the truth. You weren't competing, you were evolving, and that evolution left them exposed. Number 6. They wanted you isolated but accidentally made you the community's benchmark for integrity. Their plan was simple: push you to the margins, make you feel alone, and convince everyone else that you were untrustworthy or unworthy of attention. They believed that if they could make you seem distant, flawed, or irrelevant, the community would forget about you, and their narrative would go unchallenged. They didn't realize that isolation has a funny way of doing the opposite when the truth is on your side. Instead of turning people away, their attacks drew attention. The city began to notice details they had overlooked before: the way you carried yourself under pressure, the calm consistency in your words, the way your actions matched your promises. People started comparing what they had heard from your detractors with what they actually saw in real life, and the contrast was undeniable. There was no drama, no chaos, no hidden agendas, just someone living with honesty, discipline, and a heart that genuinely cared. Every attempt to smear you became proof of their desperation and unreliability. Meanwhile, you remained the same, steady and grounded, proving that character cannot be fabricated and integrity cannot be shaken. The more they tried to isolate you, the more the community became aware of what they were missing. Instead of making you invisible, they set the stage for you to shine as a model of trustworthiness and respect. This shift didn't happen overnight. People began to tell their friends, their colleagues, their families, "Look at how this person actually lives. Notice how consistent they are, how real they are." Slowly, you became the benchmark, the standard against which everyone else's words and actions were being measured. The city didn't just side with you because you survived their attacks. They sided with you because you showed what integrity truly looks like when tested. In trying to weaken you, they strengthened your influence. In trying to isolate you, they highlighted your value. Their miscalculation was thinking that negativity could suppress someone whose life already radiated honesty and discipline. Now, your name carries weight, your actions inspire, and the city recognizes that real character doesn't need hype. It simply exists, undeniable and unshakable, as a standard for everyone else to follow. Number 7. They spent years studying your weaknesses, but never once analyzed your strengths, and that's where they lost. They invested time, energy, and attention trying to figure out how to take you down. Every move you made was analyzed, every habit scrutinized, every word catalogued for weakness. They assumed that if they could predict your reaction, manipulate your emotions, or exploit a flaw, they could control the narrative and your life. They thought knowing your vulnerabilities would be enough, but they forgot one critical thing. Understanding weaknesses doesn't mean understanding the person as a whole. While they obsessed over cracks, you quietly built armor. While they calculated your reactions, you refined your strategy. They studied you like a problem to be solved, completely ignoring the force, resilience, and intelligence that made you unpredictable. They expected the same patterns, the same emotional triggers, the same predictable behavior, but you weren't the same person they thought they could manipulate. Your strength didn't come from being unbreakable. It came from knowing exactly how to respond when pushed, how to turn pressure into progress, and how to keep moving forward when others tried to stop you. They underestimated the wrong person. Every plan they laid, every narrative they crafted, every assumption they made collided with the reality that you were always 10 steps ahead. Their focus on weakness made them blind to the consistency, vision, and resilience that defined you. They tried to predict you emotionally, but your mind and spirit were disciplined. They aimed at vulnerability, but you responded with strategy. They thought they were in control, but the city saw what they couldn't. Their obsession with tearing you down highlighted their own insecurity, while your focus on building yourself showcased undeniable strength. Now the city isn't just witnessing your rise, they're recognizing their failure. They see the contrast between someone who is misunderstood and someone who misunderstands. The people who once followed the loudest voices are now paying attention to the truth. You weren't just surviving scrutiny, you were thriving under it. They underestimated your strengths, and that miscalculation became their undoing. Your ability to turn their years of analysis into fuel for growth didn't just prove them wrong, it exposed them entirely. Number 8. Their reputation collapsed. Because they told a story that required everyone to ignore what they witnessed firsthand. They thought they could rewrite reality with enough confidence and repetition. They spun narratives that required the community to forget what they had seen with their own eyes, to dismiss the evidence of your character, and to believe a story built on imagination rather than fact. Their plan relied on everyone ignoring the consistency, honesty, and integrity that you had displayed for years. They assumed people would take words over lived experience, rumors over reality, and dramatized accusations over the truth that had been right in front of them all along. The problem for them was that reality doesn't bend to wishful thinking. Your life wasn't built on empty statements or temporary performances. It was built on countless acts, decisions, and displays of reliability that no rumor could erase. Every interaction, every success, every demonstration of discipline and character became proof of who you really were. The community could see the difference between someone performing for attention and someone living a life of consistent integrity. And when reality is observable and undeniable, lies can only do so much. Their accusations, full of desperation and imagination, started to crumble under their own weight. People weren't blind. They had been there, they had observed, and they remembered. Every claim the detractors made contradicted the evidence the community had witnessed firsthand. Instead of convincing anyone, their stories became a reflection of their own desperation and dishonesty. The credibility they thought they had slowly eroded with every word they spoke, until it became impossible for anyone to take them seriously. In the end, their strategy backfired completely. The community didn't just reject their story, they ignored it entirely. Their lies were like debris on a road. People stepped over them without even glancing. Your life, your actions, and your integrity stood untouched, visible, and undeniable. The contrast between truth and fabrication was so stark that their reputation couldn't survive the collision. What they tried to build with manipulation collapsed because it depended on a suspension of belief the world refused to grant. You didn't need to fight it. The evidence of your life spoke louder than any of their accusations ever could. Number 9. The city sided with you. Because you were courageous enough to be transparent while they hid behind manipulation. What made people trust you wasn't perfection, it was honesty. You didn't hide behind excuses, fake confidence, or carefully rehearsed storylines. When things got messy, you faced the moment with realness. You didn't try to reinvent yourself to look innocent. You didn't twist details to win sympathy. You simply stood in your truth, even when it exposed your flaws, even when it made you vulnerable, even when it wasn't the easy thing to do. That kind of transparency isn't common, and people recognize the courage behind it. Meanwhile, the ones who tried to discredit you couldn't do the same. They moved in shadows, built narratives behind closed doors, and performed for whichever crowd would listen. Every time pressure hit, they switched their story. Every time questions came, they panicked. Every time accountability knocked, they hid behind excuses, alliances, and manipulation. Their behavior created suspicion without you having to say a single word. When someone is genuine, you can feel it. When someone is performing, you can feel that too. Your transparency made the community feel safe around you. It showed them you had nothing to hide. It showed them your confidence came from authenticity, not theatrics. And once people saw the difference between real and rehearsed, between consistent truth and shifting lies, their loyalty naturally shifted toward you. They weren't influenced, they were convinced. Your honesty held up under scrutiny. Their manipulation collapsed under its own weight. You didn't just win the city's trust, you earned it. You proved that standing in truth, even when it's uncomfortable, builds a reputation more powerful than any rumor. And the more your enemies disguised themselves, the more obvious their intentions became. In the end, the contrast exposed everything. One person rooted in integrity, the other drowning in deception. And that's why the city chose you. They saw who was real long before the final outcome made it obvious. Number 10. What made them look stupid wasn't your victory, it was their obsession with watching your failure. The real embarrassment wasn't that you won, it was that they wasted their entire storyline waiting for you to lose. They were so locked in on your setbacks, your challenges, your missteps, and your growth process that they abandoned their own lives. Their focus shifted from building themselves to monitoring you like a full-time job. And the funny part? While they were busy predicting your downfall, you were quietly upgrading into someone they couldn't compete with on their best day. Your evolution exposed what they refused to confront, their own stagnation. You kept growing even when it was painful. You kept healing even when it was lonely. You kept improving even when nobody was applauding. Meanwhile, they stayed exactly where they were, replaying the same jealousy, the same resentment, the same tired habits. Their obsession locked them in place while your persistence pulled you forward. They thought keeping tabs on you gave them power, but it actually weakened them. They poured so much attention into your life that they stopped investing in their own. They neglected their goals, their relationships, their responsibilities, because watching you became their favorite entertainment. And when someone's whole identity depends on your failure, your success becomes a mirror that exposes their wasted time and misplaced energy. That's why the city isn't laughing at your victory. They're laughing at the absurdity of your enemy's priorities. People saw the difference. One person working on their life and another person wasting theirs. One person committed to growth and another committed to gossip. One person building a future and another building rumors. The contrast became undeniable. Their downfall wasn't karma, it was focus. They chose obsession while you chose elevation. They chose pettiness while you chose purpose. And now the community sees the truth. Your success didn't make them look foolish. Their fixation did. They weren't defeated by you. They were defeated by the emptiness of their own intentions. In the end, nothing makes a person look more ridiculous than realizing the person they hoped would fail ended up becoming everything they could have been if they had focused on themselves instead. Number 11. Your silence didn't expose them. Your results did. Your silence wasn't a strategy. It was a reflection of your maturity. You didn't stay quiet to appear wise or mysterious. You stayed quiet because you understood something they never did. Results carry a weight that arguments can't compete with. While they were busy crafting accusations out of emotion, you were busy crafting a new version of yourself out of discipline, focus, and self-respect. They wanted a reaction. You built a life instead. And nothing humiliates a liar faster than a life that contradicts their story. They kept talking because talking was all they had. They had no proof, no history, no integrity to back up what they were saying. Their entire narrative depended on noise. But noise collapses when evidence enters the room. And your evidence wasn't subtle, it was undeniable. It showed up in your achievements, your growth, your peace, your stability. It showed up in the way you carried yourself through the chaos without breaking character. It showed up in the glow they couldn't explain, the confidence they couldn't destroy, and the progress they couldn't sabotage. People didn't believe you because you defended yourself. They believed you because they watched you evolve while the other side stayed the same. They saw the gap widening. They saw your discipline turning into results, and your results turning into clarity. Clarity turned into truth, and truth turned into exposure, without you ever having to say a word. That's why the city didn't need explanations. They didn't need a speech. They didn't need a confrontation. They simply watched how your life unfolded. And in watching, the truth revealed itself. Anyone whose accusations collapse in the presence of your growth was lying from the beginning. Your silence didn't win the battle. Your transformation did. You didn't expose them by speaking. You exposed them by becoming someone their lies could no longer reach. Number 12, they look stupid because they fought someone who wasn't fighting them. You were busy fulfilling purpose. What exposed them wasn't conflict, it was contrast. They tried to turn your life into a battlefield, but you refused to pick up a weapon. You were focused on something far bigger than their pettiness, your assignment, your healing, your evolution, your future. While they were rehearsing comebacks and inventing drama, you were upgrading your mindset, strengthening your character, and aligning yourself with opportunities they didn't even know you had access to. They threw jabs at someone who wasn't even in the ring, and that's why the whole city sees them as clowns. They mistook your silence for weakness, but it was actually a sign of direction. People with purpose don't get distracted by nonsense. They don't waste time defending themselves to spectators who don't matter. They don't argue with people who think chaos is a personality. You weren't ignoring them, you simply didn't consider them relevant to the life you were building. And that's the part that bruised their ego the most. Fighting you became their full-time job. Being unbothered became your superpower. As time passed, the audience began to see the mismatch. On one side stood someone fueled by insecurity, gossip, and envy. On the other stood someone focused, calm, and too occupied with growth to even hear the noise. It became obvious who was evolving and who was spiraling. They were putting on a show, waiting for applause that never came. The community eventually realized that someone who's truly being attacked doesn't elevate at the rate you did. Their biggest embarrassment is that they made you their mission while you made yourself your priority. They were studying your every move while you were studying your future. They were competing for attention while you were competing with your own potential. They were shadowboxing, sweating, talking, and performing, while you kept rising without ever acknowledging the fight they created in their head. In the end, nothing made them look more foolish than the truth. You can't win a fight against someone who never showed up to it. You were too busy fulfilling purpose to even notice they were swinging. Number 13. The city sides with you because your character has been consistent, even when your circumstances weren't. Consistency is the quiet power most people fail to recognize until it stares them in the face. Anyone can look good when life is easy, when doors are open, and when nothing is threatening their comfort. But you? You maintained your integrity in the chaos, under pressure, and while everyone, including those who should have supported you, was questioning your every move. Your character didn't bend when circumstances were tough. It didn't crumble when criticism rained down. That unwavering consistency didn't just protect you, it built trust so deep that the city couldn't ignore it. The difference between you and your enemies was clear. They could perform stability when it benefited them, when the spotlight favored their version of reality. But true character, the kind that earns loyalty, doesn't switch depending on circumstance. It persists in private, in hardship, and in the moments no one is watching. And that persistence, that quiet, unshakable presence of integrity, is what made the city see you as reliable, honorable, and trustworthy. While they were unpredictable, reactive, and fueled by ego, you were steady, purposeful, and focused. People gravitate toward reliability because it signals safety, leadership, and truth. And over time, the community noticed the contrast between your resilience and their volatility. They saw who could handle adversity without losing composure, who could maintain principle when shortcuts would have been easier, and who could rise above drama instead of drowning in it. Your consistency didn't just earn you trust, it exposed their instability. The same people who tried to question you, manipulate you, and discredit you were revealed for what they really were: reactive, unreliable, and predictable in their downfall. Their weaknesses were magnified simply because your strengths were so visible and constant. In the end, the city sided with you not because you shouted the loudest or acted the most convincing, but because your life told the story they could see with their own eyes. Your character has been steady, even when everything around you wasn't, and that is the ultimate proof that loyalty, respect, and trust can never be faked. Number 14. They're eating their words. Because you ended up becoming the person they swore you'd never be. They had you pegged. They told themselves stories about who you were, what you could do, and where your limits lay. They created a version of you small enough to control, fragile enough to manipulate, and predictable enough to dismiss. Every word they said about your inevitability to fail was a prophecy they repeated to convince themselves, and maybe even to convince the city, that you would never rise above their expectations. They assumed destiny had a script and that you were playing a role they had already written. But destiny doesn't follow the rules of fear and doubt, and you refused to play the character they assigned you. Every step you took, every goal you achieved, every barrier you overcame proved that their assumptions were not only wrong, they were laughably wrong. You became someone bigger, stronger, and more refined than they could have imagined. The version of you they swore would never exist is now undeniable evidence that their judgment was flawed from the start. Watching you rise became more than frustrating for them. It was embarrassing. They had invested energy, opinions, and even social credibility in a narrative that couldn't hold up against reality. Their predictions collapsed not because you fought back, but because you quietly proved them false. Your growth didn't come from revenge. It came from purpose, persistence, and unwavering belief in yourself. And that is what makes it so striking. Their disbelief wasn't just wrong. It highlighted how little they actually understood. The city sees it all. They see someone thriving despite the doubt, someone evolving despite the criticism, someone fulfilling what everyone else swore was impossible. And that is why they are eating their words. Not because you wanted to humiliate them, but because your life became a living contradiction to every lie, every assumption, and every limit they tried to impose. Your success is not a story of spite. It is proof of destiny, resilience, and the undeniable truth that those who misjudge greatness only reveal their own short-sightedness. Conclusion: when everything is finally put together, one truth becomes impossible to deny. You didn't just survive what was meant to destroy you, you turned it into the very proof that validated your purpose. Every attack, every rumor, every false prediction about your life only emphasized how deeply they misread the assignment God placed on you. They worked overtime to convince the city you were weak, unstable, or bound to fail, yet the very opposite unfolded right in front of everyone's eyes. The story they wrote for you collapsed because it was built on insecurity, while the life you built for yourself stands tall because it was built on truth. The city didn't side with you by accident. They watched your character stay solid under pressure, your integrity remain untouched when tested, and your growth persist even when it wasn't convenient. They witnessed a consistency your enemies could never imitate. They watched you elevate without clapping back, win without performing, and rise without stepping on anyone. And because of that,